Hi, everybody. Rebecca Nelson with you once again with Becker Vineyards to do another fabulous virtual tasting with you. And this is, of course, our Father's Day week package. So we're really excited for everybody to join us. Happy Father's Day to everyone over the weekend, especially my own dad. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I hope everybody had a great weekend, and I'm really excited to kick off this week with these wines. We once again delved into our library. So these are wines that are no longer available for tasting in our general tasting rooms. And we have these kind of set back for special occasions and special events and elevated tastings. And so we're really excited that everybody gets to try these. Tonight, we're trying the 2015 vintage of our Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve, all from the Canada Family Vineyard. Canada being the last name of the grower, not where they live. And we'll go over all of that through the tasting, I'm sure. Tonight, to get you guys started, we have our winemaker with us again, John Leahy. We also have our general manager, Bret and there may or not be a few other guests joining in with us as the broadcast goes on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John to get us all started. And everybody have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the wine. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thanks for that great introduction yet again. I am now not remote from the wilderness of northern Texas. I'm actually back in civilization. I did want you to know, though, what I was up there for was hunting these things. As Bret likes to say, they're little sticks. They're little fossils that we went fossil hunting on Friday. So that's what I got to do over Father's Day weekend. So, and hopefully, Bret, hopefully Joe will join us. But in the interim, why don't we introduce everybody to this wonderful double gold award-winning wine, the 2015 Canada Cab.
Yeah, so I got the fortunate task of going to pick some of these wines, and it's really never a bad day when Dr. Becker calls and says, you can go down into the library and pick whatever you want to, put up on these tastings. And, you got to try them to make sure that they're all right, and it takes a lot of trial and error.
I'm not quite sure which vintage. We'll have to go through them again.
Yeah, I can't remember which one I like the most. Let's open it up and do it again tomorrow. But it was really fun to kind of go through these, and for people that know about our library program, this is Library Pack that we specifically did for Father's Day, and the goal was to have things that we actually had enough to sell, number one. But when we started the library, I can't remember even what year now it was, but 2007 we started putting back a fairly good quantity of wines, and I think that the goal in that was to release them later. But the problem was, from the 2007 vintages, I didn't hide them from Dr. Becker. He just kept getting into it, and he kept getting into it, and I think there's only 5 cases left of the 2007 library wine that we put down there. And so by the time we got to these years in 2015, I think I went and hit about 6 pallets, so roughly 300 cases, and that way we could come back and get them. And again, they've been doing so well that I still would have thought they would have lasted 20 years, and I probably should have held back 500 cases of it,
Right.
But
well,
anyway,
there's half the vintage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to get everybody into tasting this, and as we've gotten a couple questions already. And of course, Gary Clark, one of our longtime viewers, he's like, "Pulled the cork, smells great. Let's taste." So,
let's go. Yeah.
Good reminder, Gary. Thank you. And you can taste all you want, Gary. I'm not stopping you. But if everybody wants to give it a swirl, a sniff, and a taste, and you know what? Canada is so distinctive on that dark note. That Cabernet is just wonderful. I'm going to do something I haven't really done a lot in the past. I'm going to tell you what I like, and then I'm going to pick out the winemaker flaws in here. But before I do that, Bret, what are your impressions on here?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you say it's got the Canada terroir. It's got the flavor of that vineyard, and I told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. But you walk in that vineyard and you look at the rocks that are out there, and I literally had the tasting room staff that went with us on a couple field trips, and about the second time I went, I was like, man, people talk about the way that this wine tastes because of the clay. I mean, the limestone that's sitting on top of the ground out there. And I picked up a rock and licked it. And I think that, half the staff that was behind me was like, what is he doing? I was like, no, grab it. This is what you're tasting in this wine. And I think that is, totally indicative of what I'm picking up currently.
I got a rock you can lick right here.
Yeah,
and it's limestone.
Yeah, it tastes like that fossil, but I do think that any one of the wines, if somebody from the tasting room comes up and hands me a glass of wine to taste and says, what do you think this is? I can always pick this one up because it's so unique in its flavor components, and it does have kind of a bell pepper note to it. We talk about pyrazines and Cab Franc and the other things that come about, and historically this wine when we release our reserve program, historically there's a path to it, and we can talk about that a little bit. But what I get is the Canada Vineyard, the dirt. I'm tasting that when I taste this 2015.
I think I'm in trouble because I called the fossil limestone, and I'm getting a note from the resident geologist here. Anyway, I want to get back to the wine here. Here, you're gonna get confused. Never try to read notes and talk at the same time. I can't do two things at once usually. Anyway, I wanted to shout out to a couple people joining us again from far reaches of Fort Lauderdale and Amarillo, Texas, about equidistance from the hill country. But the dark notes, as you mentioned, Bret, the pyrazines in here, which I think are needed in Cabernet. I really think that's the indicative note that I love about Cabernet, especially a well-developed or mature pyrazine. What I don't particularly like, because I hadn't had time to get this down to cellar temperature, so immediately what I first smell right when I decanted it was a little bit of alcohol, and it's not that hot. It's 14.2% on the alcohol, but this is why we talk about kind of getting it down to that cellar temperature. So the first thing you notice are the fruits, the pyrazines, things like that. So that was the one fault I had. I didn't have it quite on the cool side enough for me. But I'm looking for things that are wrong. I'm not necessarily always looking for things that are right. That's an automatic default. But what I noticed immediately, right when I threw my glass back up the second time, were those dark notes, that dark chocolate or dark cherry edge in there. When I say chocolate, I don't mean sweet. I mean just that really nice tannic mellowness there. And I really love that about the 2015.
Yeah, and I think that if we go back to the accolades and stuff, and we did the double gold week, this actually won a double gold from the San Francisco Chronicle in 2018. Even though that's when we sent it in. So apparently somebody else liked it too, even though you're picking on it a little bit. There was 60 judges that thought it was good enough to get a gold medal, so we got a double gold.
Right.
But again, trying to go back to this, like why did we save this wine? We don't just willy-nilly put this in the cellar or any other wine in the library every single year. It's because we felt like at the time that we were tasting it in its current release, we felt like it garnered holding it back and putting it in the library. And people come all the time and they ask, well, how many wines do you have in the library? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, if you go downstairs, that tasting area will hold about 500 total cases in the underground part. And then we converted that other warehouse in the back to hold the rest of it. Because when I put back 6 pallets of something like this that we want to keep for 20 years, we got to have space to keep it cool and at the right temperature and all that kind of good stuff. And you remember when I don't remember what year we started flipping the bottles that were going out of the winery, but previous to that, we were putting them in the from the bottling line cork up, right? Because we were selling through them so fast. And then as we started kind of going down this road, we decided to flip them upside down. And I honestly
think it was actually 2016. So right before we bottled the 2015, we started doing that.
Yeah, and I think that the previous vintage, you remember we had to have everybody go back in the warehouse and flip all the boxes upside down.
Yeah.
On the stuff that we kept longer, just because that wasn't really what we were trying to do at the time we were making that wine. So I do think that that's kind of a neat evolution of things that we were doing even in production. Yep. Just that we knew that we were going to hold these things a lot longer. So
I want to just digress just a second, because I really want everybody to sniff and taste this wine again. But the Cabernet, so the Canada Vineyard, we sit out in Plains, Texas, just west of Plains, towards the New Mexico border. The geology out there is much older than, I'm being cute when I hold up these fossils from the Pennsylvanian, but the development out there on the geologic map of Texas, you can see a much older quaternary, I've got to look back at my notes. I will get these ages bad. So the Pliocene age, there's a band right by their vineyard, and it actually extends down to the Wilmouth Vineyard too. The drainage area, and it just has cut away a lot of the younger stuff into that older, and the Canada Vineyard sits right on the preface, right on that border. So that's why when we go in there, we see such low surface soil and a lot of rock, and those vines struggle a lot there, but that mineralization is very distinctive there. And I love it. I love the fact that the Canadas and, 20 miles away, the Wilmeth Vineyard share some of that similar banding right through there. And I really want to.
Yeah, and I think that nobody in the world could put these two wines. If you put Canada and Wilmeth together for every vintage that we've ever made for them, they do not taste anything alike. And if you guys are doing the same thing in the cellar, as far as fermentation temperature and the barrel program that we're using, like those two distinct parts of the ground is what's making these taste different in my mind. And again, you can blend and you can do this other stuff, but for the most part, that's what makes them unique in their own right, just like the other vineyards. And that's also why, by the way, we keep everything separate. So it's a huge pain from the time harvest starts to keep, that many batches of different vineyard blocks separate. We don't just dump, Cabernet in a tank and call it Cabernet. We call it Wilmeth Cabernet. We call it Canada Cab. We keep our estate stuff. Everything stays separate. And it would be a lot easier for us just to go tank 27 as Cab till it's full, and it doesn't matter where it came from. It's just Cab. But that's not what we built this brand around. Is the distinct, flavors and the notes that come from the actual vineyard sites that are being grown on them. And again, the uniqueness in Texas is having so many of those sites that are so varied. Not just geologically, but in how far apart they are.
Yeah, well, so the Oglala formation, which is basically where the Canadas are, so that's a very much older formation on there. Cab loves to struggle, and when you get that rock in there, not a lot of deep, rich soil, you first of all, you don't have a lot of vigor, so you get a lot more development in the fruit. I mean, there are many different layers to this program. It's not just the age of the formation. I just looked at my notes. I wanted to get that right, so somebody wasn't, somebody in the background wasn't staring at me with daggers in their eyes. Not that anything's wrong with marrying a geologist. Just be very, very careful. But the Canada Cab, the distinct difference for me between that and all of our other cabs is that heavy mineralization there. And we got a question early on, two questions I want to hit before we actually get back into the questions. One was, sorry to ask the food question early. Will this go with my crab bisque? Yes, it will. That bisque, if it's a cream-based bisque, there's a lot of fat in there. Fat and tannin pair together. Just remember that. That's all you got to remember. Fats, food fats and tannins paired together. So the other one was, you had mentioned keeping 20 years. Somebody's like, did I hear right? Will this keep 20 years? And Angela, yes, the wine will, in our estimate, if it's properly stored, keep an easy 20 years without a problem. 2036, pop the cork on the 2016, or 2035 for the 15, and you'll be wonderfully surprised, we hope. But I really do think it will. And we've been increasing the extraction on this wine, in the last 8 years. We've really, for me, I've really come to appreciate the vineyard more. And as a winemaker, what I really want to do is make a really nicely extracted wine. This wine, there's a lot of upfront tannins in there, which tells you that it's going to lay down for a long time. It's still young,
Well, when we do the library tour downstairs, we go all the way back, and I think in the original part of the library tour, when we first started, I had the 2007 version of this, and quickly realized that if I kept it on the list in the library tour, it was going to sell out. We would never see it again. So we took that off, and then we put more, like even of the 2009 that was down there, and had a fairly large quantity of it, but it was just so good still that people were buying it like crazy. And I told Dr. Becker, I said, we have got to limit the amount of this that we're going to have, because we want to try it in 20 years and know that we stored it at the right temperature in the right place, and do all the things that you need to do to actually sell our wine. So we have that basis for, I think that the number one question we get in the tasting room is how long will this age? And the funny part about that is that, what's the statistic? 97% of the wine in the United States is consumed within 4 hours of its purchase. And so it's kind of a little bit of a misnomer about how we always talk about how long wines will actually age, but so much wine is normally purchased by people going to the store on their way home and buying wine for dinner or buying wine for a party. And of course that's changed in this last year, but it's crazy how we look at that,
Yeah. I'm going to interrupt you a little bit, because a person I think you might know, Cade Browning.
Oh yeah.
In 2036, Texas Bicentennial, book it, Buffalo Gaps.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, there was another person asking what the proper, how to keep wine for 20 years. What is proper storage? Proper storage just means no temperature fluctuation. Ideal storage is one thing. ideal is 55 degrees for its entire life and don't let it fluctuate. And that's great if you have the resource to develop that. For me, it's finding the coolest spot in the basement or in the interior closet with no outside walls where the temperature stays constant and keep that in there. The cooler, the better. You know, if you keep it at 70 degrees, it's not going to age as long as if you can keep it at 55, certainly. But, you know, if you want to try to keep a bottle of wine for 10 years, cooler is better. For 20 years, definitely cool. You definitely want to keep it cool and not fluctuating temperature. Temperature fluctuation month to month or season to season kills a wine quicker than anything. So,
and one of the worst places to put your wine at home is on top of your fridge. A lot of people buy wine, like little wine racks that they stick up on top of their fridge. That's the hottest place that you could put a bottle of wine, as that air comes back over the top. And realize that, you know, sun exposure is a big thing as well. Even though, like the first house that I built after we were at the winery, I put a wine rack on the one side of the island, and every night when the sun set, it came right through the front door and got that wine exposed to sun.
Yeah.
And so we really quickly learned that you don't do that. You put the empty bottles in there that you want to make it look like it's a wine rack, and you got to put your stuff in the closet, and it doesn't matter.
I did the same thing. We had a wine fridge for a while that was on a south wall, and that wore that refrigerator out quickly because of the heat, just that gap of heat and that compressor and stuff. So, I mean, it really does take a bit. Somebody just asked about, can we keep part of this bottle until Friday and then have all three together? And we mentioned this last week. So yes, we'll be glad to do all three together. And here's a cheat sheet. Guys, this is not going to last more than a few days. This cheat I'm about to give you, this professional life hack, enter at your own risk. Remember, I'm willing to take silly risks with it, but if you take the bottle, put the cork back in. If you don't have an inert gas like that wine saver that we sell at the winery to put in there, if you do not have that, or do not have that hand pump that will pump the air out and put a seal on that, then just put the cork back in the bottle and put that bottle in the freezer. Put it in the freezer for a couple of days. You know, as long as there's about that much out of the bottle, room for expansion, because some of the water might crystallize on the top, but most of the wine won't freeze. Put it in there, that cold temperature, for a couple of days. This is no more than 2 or 3 days. So from now till Friday is fine. And then take the wine out a couple of hours before. So do tonight's and Wednesdays, take it out on Fridays. You'll have 3 perfectly good wines to try side by side. But if you don't want to, if you want to drink the wine tonight, that's fine too. We will go through on Friday all 3 again. We'll do a recap on this. So just to answer that question.
John, I want to point out, one of the hardest things I had to learn when I got into the wine business was how to remember what something tasted like. You know, so like if you're sitting here tasting this at home, you gotta lock that in your brain, like your grandma's apple pie that you remember smelling or tasting, like that. You have to lock that in, and you have to put that much attention to it if you're going to go back and remember what that vintage or that one that you tried was. And my curse is I can't remember names, you know, or numbers. And I actually had to call Miss Canada because, you know, in the winemaking time that I've been here, I remember the anomalies that happened, like 2013 where there's a freeze, 2017 where there's so much fruit. And so I actually called her today at about 4:45 and I said, Miss Canada, what do you remember about 2015? And so I had that list, and her list was pretty much that, you know, that she had different things happening. They had a lot of snow in the early part of the year. And January, January, February, like 5 inches of snow. And after we went through this whole thing, and we can go through, I have it on your agenda, but what she pretty much said in a nutshell was, I don't remember anything bad happening, but I can remember that it was an easier year than what we've had in the past. And again, 5 inches of snow in January doesn't matter. It's actually giving moisture to the vine so that we have this way to go about it. But the interesting thing that she told me was, I put my hand in the vine to take samples, and it felt like I put my hand in a refrigerator. And so
the canopy was cooler than the outside.
Yeah. So we started thinking about, well, what made that happen? Were they watering? Like, what made that to where that grape, the last week that it was trying to develop, why was it cooler in there when she put her hand in there? Well, there's a lot of different things. And, you know, obviously if they were watering at a certain time of the day, or there was low humidity or whatever, the vine itself was saying, I'm insulating you from this heat. We're going to keep this cool. And that flavor development that we're tasting, and I think is coming out. And again, it goes back to, what is a normal year here? And there isn't one, but if she did say that if there was a normal year, I wish it was like 2015, because there was no notes about a catastrophe.
Right. Well, and that's how you're right. That is how we tend to remember those things stick in our head. The hurricane in 17, the extreme freeze event or late freeze event in 13. Looking back on my notes, and that's, you talk about palate memory and developing that. That's why I've got notebooks. When I taste at home, I put it in my little home notebook. When I taste at work, I've got my big workbook at work, but I have to take notes. You just have to, and eventually you'll develop your own system on how to remember. Like, I know what I mean by when I write the weird blackberry chocolate, I know what that means, for things like that. But in 2015, one of the things I remember was, after 2013 we lost 80% of the crop. 2014 we only got about 50% of what we were expecting, because it was also the active buds for 14 were damaged in 13, along with the 13 dormant buds. In 2015, we got a full harvest on all of the vineyards. And I remember a boatload of Cabernet coming in from the Canadas. We had 2 semi-loads full of Cabernet, and it looked like pristine jewels. It was the most even ripened fruit. That dark skin development, the plump fruit. The turgor was still there, just starting to give up. I mean, that you couldn't have asked for a better fruit at all, as far as that goes.
So some of our other notes were that even bud break, like April 6th, it just all pot. Like when the grapes woke up, they were good. They had rain later, a lot of rain, but it was early in August, and then it dried out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm gonna have to throw this in on Friday, because we're gonna have Daniel and his wife on here on Friday night. Miss Canada's son, Daniel. They had to get their uncle to come over and help them finish the harvest in this vintage, because their harvester wasn't happy, is what she told me as I was typing.
Yeah.
Which means there was a mechanical problem. She said that Uncle Neil had such a great setup on the harvester that there was no berries even close to the posts that they missed that she could make jelly out of. And so
I
the jelly.
I think you aged Uncle Neil. He's supposed to be nephew Neil.
Yeah, right. So no, it's Daniel's uncle.
Oh, Daniel's uncle. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not Brenda's.
No. But she did say that the jelly harvest for that year was so light because he did such a great job with the machine and how he set it up. And so we have to give Daniel a hard time on Friday about, have you figured out how to set the machine up like Uncle Neil so that there's no jelly crop?
Oh, that's excellent. We got something to give him a little grief over. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But, I just remember the first time, after we got the double gold on this and we went back through and started tasting, and it's like, and you do this, it's like, so what made this a double gold? Why did 60 judges love this? What was it about this? You start diving into there until you realize, hey, wait a minute, we just got a double gold on a Texas Cabernet, vineyard designate Cabernet Sauvignon, and how many, this is going to be bad, and you guys can send me hate email if you want to, that's fine. It's Bret@BeckerWines.com. But
hey, with 2 T's.
Yeah, with 2 T's, there you go. But the thing that I remember, I was like, you know what? How I went back through that list, I was like, oh, so-and-so from California, this is me, right? I know these people. Oh, you didn't get a double gold this year, doing this over and over. And I'm like, but what is it about these concentrated cabs there? And then this concentrated cab, they're different, certainly, but Texas we're finding our stride. And that's what I love about this. It really, 15 to me was that first lead-in year, because with 15, 16, 17, and 18, we've got these double gold years. 14, of course, started with a few, but this was all of a sudden we're vaulting into these incredibly nationally recognized wines from these beautiful small family vineyards in Texas. And that's
and the Wilmeth also won the double gold in the same contest. So that was the box that we have that we're sitting down by our office.
Right. So yeah, well, we've got, it's not just the Canadas, you're right. But I mean, we're talking about this wine, this did win. And that 15, to me, what makes 15 remarkable is that how nice and even the year was, that we got so many good wines from that year, proving that these vineyards can do what they do. And we've got this incredible opportunity as Texas winemakers to do this. That's what 15 to me is. That's that year that we let in. We got through the crap of 13. You know, we slogged through 14 and made damn good wine. And we were rewarded with a 15 beautiful year. 16 was a beautiful year. 17 had its problems, but in the high plains was a beautiful year. 18 was a good year. 19, you know.
But to me, 17 is going to go down in, like, I've said this 20 times. Mark my words, the 17s from Texas are going to be the year that's where the money's at. And you talk about a good year in a spot. That was where our good year was. And as good as what this is, even at the age that it is, wait till that 17 comes rolling out of the box. You know?
So I got a question here. Yes, Trish. And Trish, I absolutely missed you on Friday. I'm sorry I didn't get to see your questions, but Trish wanted to know, do you or did you Saunier the Canada Cab in this vintage? And the answer is yes. Yes, I did. In 15, we did not have to Saunier much. So the berries were smaller. They were not large. So I kind of judge Saunier in a couple of things. One, the size of the berry. Does it look like a table grape or does it look like a pea? If it looks like a pea, I'm not Sauniering anything. If it looks like a table grape, I'm going to take a little more juice. If it's in between the two, then, you know, it's kind of hit and miss on how much we'll take out of there. But on 15, we probably removed about 10 to 15 gallons per ton of expected yield out of there. So, you know, 5 to 10% Saunier on the juice, Trish, and that really helped concentrate things. And it's not, you know, I had somebody say, so you cheat, you Saunier, you cheated. I'm like, well, buddy, it's not cheating. It's called resource management. But
John, talk about that, because you know, people think you make wine like you make a cake. It's not the same. You got to look at what's coming on. You're tasting it.
Yeah,
it's not a recipe, and you're adjusting that based on what you're seeing at the time that it hits the back door. And I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, and fair point. And I am a bit of a smart aleck. Bear with me. I apologize for people if my smart mouth gets in the way here. But one very important thing to remember is that it's harvest. You've got an easy 50 decisions to make for every lot of wine before that goes in the tank. 5 of those decisions will affect you for the entire lifetime of that wine. If you mess up one of those, you might be able to get away. You mess up 2 of them, and that's it. You've got a big problem on your hand. So one of the things that we have to decide is how ripe that fruit is, gauged on color, on the chemistry, and then on taste. So we have 3 different things that we can come together and mesh them and say, this is fully ripe, this is partially ripe, this is underripe, or this is crap, you know, and you do measure it. I use better words than crap on there. I usually use insufficient ripeness, which is a polite way of saying it. But one of the things that I will decide to do when I'm in the vineyard, I'll make a note. Okay, I don't think I need to Saunier as much. It looks fairly well, or pretty small berry. Then it comes in and that goes out the window. And Rachel, if she were here, this is the point where she would be rolling her eyes, because we go over for a couple of weeks before harvest starts. I have an entire matrix on what every lot, every vineyard, and every lot from every vineyard, what we're expected to do, the type of yeast trials I want to try on that, or the ones from the previous year that I liked or didn't like, the barrels, everything is laid out. It's cheaper to make wine on paper first. Then as soon as that first grape comes in, Rachel swears up and down, I rip that sheet up and throw it in the air. I don't always, but there are decisions that you have to make on the fly. And one of that is this, how ripe this fruit was, like 17. 17 we Saunier'd, but we didn't Saunier in 17 because we needed to. We Saunier'd in 17 because I love the flavor so much. I wanted some of those subtle fruit flavors in a rosé. So I didn't take that much out of there. So it was for a different purpose. In 15, we Saunier'd to increase the concentration just a hair. That tannin shows through now. You Saunier with the hopes that a few years later, 5, 8 years later, you're going to taste the result there. That's the hardest call to make. The prognostication is not my forte. I cannot tell the future, but I can say, taste here. This is what it should be if I do this. Here's an idea. It's not a recipe. It's trial and error. It's learning and listening from previous trial and errors of other people who've come before me. You know, so it's 150 years of collected knowledge in American winemaking that comes to tell you, try this. You know, I remember in 2012 talking to a gentleman who was the head winemaker for Treasury Wine Estate, who was my neighbor in St. Helena, and asking him, why in Australia, I noticed you guys add some acid, you know, I was thinking about a gram or two. And he goes, a gram or two? Good on you. Have 5. Don't forget one for the grape skins. You know, it was just like, what? You know, these Australians have hot winemaking down. So I asked him, I'm new to Texas. What do you think? And he's telling me, here's some of the things to try. But over the first couple of years that I was there, I tried some worked, some didn't. So it is trial and error to develop the idea, to develop the tool. It's not a recipe, it's a tool.
Well,
Sorry.
I think that, I know, but I think that trying to, and again, maybe everybody doesn't know what Saignée is, but it means you're taking a percentage of the big tank off, bleed it off. And again, ask the GM who's got to pay the bills how much he likes to watch the prize cab going into and
what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, right. But it's made a big difference in the quality of the wine that we made, and again, you have to make that choice. You're making that cut, and I do think that people don't understand the difference in the beverage that we make. Is that it's not like beer, it's not like vodka where you're just you're doing the same thing at the same temperature. The reason why wine is a little different is that it's a little more living in the fact that you're not just taking the same parameters and stamping them out every single time that you're making it. We could buy our favorite beer and our favorite vodka, and it's going to taste the same almost every time. And there are growing conditions that could affect that, but it's a little bit different, and that's why this makes it so cool. By the way, so if you can remember what you're doing with this one tonight on this vintage, and then remember it all the way through Friday, I think you've definitely upgraded your status in the wine drinking world, because it took most of us a couple years to build that memory of taste.
Right. Yeah. And palate, we talk about that palate memory, and you do develop that, doing it day in and day out. You start to remember, hey, this does taste like a Canada. You start sniffing, it's like, oh yeah. Or this is a Jet Wilmoth Cab, or, Neil Newsom Merlot, or, you deal with these things, or the Almondsere, or Steve Newsom's Merlot. These have distinctive scent profiles or flavor profiles year to year, but they change. And so you try to adjust to that change to make the best wine possible. But you do definitely, especially when I go to blend, I'm like, in the past, these two haven't worked together. I'm still going to try it just on the edge, maybe 1 out of 5, it'll work. But in the past, these have always worked together. So I'm going to definitely start with this too. So that's some of the things that you do remember. And palate memory is very, very important. So, just tasting through this again, and this is really opening up. So Bret, what are you getting out of the wine right now?
Can I say forest floor? No. No.
You could. Some people say mushroom or earth, but forest floor. Yeah. Just not sweaty saddle leather.
No. No, I would say definitely some forest floor. And again, it's got fruit notes in it still, even though that it's and luckily I can remember what the other ones taste like going all the way back to the first one. And this is just on track to just keep being happy for a long time. So, if people don't have it and you didn't buy enough, you should cellar it. If you're gonna buy it, you can't buy 1 or 2 bottles. You have to buy enough that you can try wines to cellar.
Right.
If you have a cellar, you need to get into them at times. I had somebody come in and go, well, we got this incredible collection. We buy one of everything that we want to put away. I'm like, that's not going to work, because by the time you open the one and it's already went over the hill, you missed it, So
yeah. Or you open the one, it's perfect. You're like, wow, I wish I had 3 or 4 more.
Yeah, right.
And early on in my career, when you're trying to buy wines to cellar and store, and you're like, well, I could buy 2 bottles of that, or I could go out and pay the electric bill. I don't need wine. But the thing that I love about this wine as it's opening up is that incredible, that fresh edge of bell pepper, but that incredible dark cherry or dark currant note that keeps coming out. Somebody just asked, how do you distinguish between the Wilmoth and the Canada? Canada, to me, always starts off a little darker on the initial nose, where Wilmoth is a little brighter on the nose. So you get a little more fruit or a little more floral on the Wilmoth initially, of same age, I'm talking. So 2-3 years in the bottle. And then the Canada starts to open up into some of the darker fruit notes, where Wilmoth, after it opens for a while, starts developing more of those rich, earthier notes. So that's basically like, I know I just opened this, smell it, okay, that smells more like a Wilmoth, or I just opened this a little deeper, smells more like a Canada. then they diverge from there. They're two different Cabernets, equally beautiful, but for a variety of different reasons. So since this is our first Father's Day, cheers, Bret. Happy Father's Day. Absolutely fantastic. Happy Father's Day out there to everyone who is a father, expected to be father, or wants to be a father. Yeah, good on you. But so the real briefly, food pairings, and then I want us to touch on the rest of the week and then next week too for the folks. So what food?
So,
Bret? No tenderloin.
Yeah. So yesterday I diverged very far from the tenderloin and had a ribeye, for Father's Day, and I had a Cabernet or two.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's, to me, this is what needs to have a steak. I don't care if you barbecue it. I don't care if you pan fry it. Like, just, it's the old thing about a slab and a cab, and this would work,
Yeah, it would. It's hard. There are a variety of other foods that will certainly go well with this. As somebody mentioned earlier in the broadcast, they're having a bisque, a crab bisque. Yes, that would go great. I don't think it's the perfect pairing. It would be fine if, like I said, fat and tannins go together. But I have to agree with you. A really nice piece of beef. I'm going to go down the tenderloin route here after I gave you all that shit. but the ribeye would be beautiful. A Cabernet, you're right. It just screams for a nice piece of beef. It is a beautiful pairing. The only other thing I could tell you, if I couldn't have that, honestly, a good meaty fish, I guess, would be my second pairing, like a salmon or something that's got a lot of fat in there. But beef, it's always going to be beef for me on Cabernet. Okay, I guess next week, what are we hitting next week, Bret, on our pack up?
All right. So this week we're going to finish out with this vertical, and so we're going to do the 14 on Wednesday, and then the 12 on Friday. And again, the 12 is something that it was John's first year to be in Texas, and we're going to give him all the street cred for that one. And then the following week we're going to do a Muscat Shannon Main Street Cab, which is one that's only available here where I'm at Main Street in Fredericksburg, and then the Primavera, which is one of the Quattro Stagioni. And then I got to pick the one after that, and this is getting out again another week, but I got to go to the library on Saturday, and we picked all 2012s. That'll be kind of cool, and just watch for them. And again, we're going to go back to 2012 when the library program really got started, and do the estate Merlot, which I have a little bit of a story about. I'm not going to tell today. The Barbera Merlot, which came from the Mason Vineyard, which I'm not going to tell that story today.
Really?
Yeah, no. And then the Wilmeth 12, which will compare to the one that we're having this Friday. So again, nice. It'll be the round of 12s after next week. So watch for that.
That'll be fun. I can hardly wait for the Barbera Merlot. There's some good stories there. Well, I'm not going to hit the barrel regime, people. You'll just have to guess that it might have been a predominant French oak. But the thing I will tell you, if you want to join us on Friday for a recap of all three, I will recap the notes on all three for everybody. If you want to save part of your wine, you can. If you're watching this and you're not sure whether you're going to open it or not, wait till Friday and open all three. That's fine too. But you certainly, please enjoy. And then I guess for our little close here, again, thank you everybody for joining us and supporting us. We really like the fact that we have so many good friends that take the time out of their day to join us. I will say, we're missing both Doc and Joe. So again, thank you to everybody out there who is helping us through these times. A lot of tumultuous times, but remember that our thoughts and our hopes and our prayers go out to everybody everywhere. As Americans, we love to see everybody active in their community, helping out. And I couldn't be prouder at this moment in time. So I want to cheers. I want to wish health and good wine, and look forward to joining everybody on Wednesday again. So good night.
Good night.